I posted a video a couple of months ago, which I called "How Do You Defend Someone Who You Think Is Guilty?" The whole video is about the presumption of innocence, and as a result of that posting, I had a student who got in touch with me who said that although he found the video very interesting, that I'd chosen a single emotive case that was probably not reflective of the reality of life. And to that student, I say this: you should not be so cynical when you're so young. And here's another example of the way in which the criminal bar works and the way in which we have to practice as defense counsel. I was defending, many years ago, an accountant who was charged with doing inappropriate things to his daughter while she was between the ages of 12 and 14. And she didn't make an allegation until she was 28. And so by that stage, of course, there was no forensic evidence, there was no physical evidence. But what there was in this case, which was unusual, was a diary that it was admitted this girl must have written between the ages of 13 and 14. And in that diary, she detailed, as a 14-year-old would, all the things that Daddy had done to her. And I said to my defendant, the accountant, when he came to see me in conference in his pinstriped suit, "How is it that you explain that?" And I couldn't get a sensible word from him because he was just racked with sobs, his shoulders were shaking, and all he could say was, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I swear on everything, I didn't do it." Anyway, at the end of that conference, I had no explanation for the diary. I had no explanation for the reasons why, if any, his daughter would turn on him in the way that she had. And the case eventually came to trial, and this woman, his daughter, who was now 28 years old, she came to give evidence. And everything I asked her, she had an answer for. In fact, I'd hardly stood up and asked her name when I felt the enmity from the jury like a Sahara wind, because juries hate cases like this, where there is inappropriate sexual activity against young women. And everything that I asked her, she had an answer for, and her case got stronger and stronger and stronger. And after about half an hour, 40 minutes, the judge said to me, "Mr. D'Souza, you're beginning to repeat yourself. In actual fact, you're beginning to harass this woman, and if you've got nothing else to put to her, please sit down." And at that stage, I turned, looked in the dock, and I saw my defendant again. His shoulders were heaving. All I heard were his sobs. He had his head in his hands, and I thought, if I sit down now, he's going to prison for a very, very long time. And I was desperately leafing through my counsel's notebook, thinking of something to ask her. And just to cover the uncomfortable silence, I asked her about her mother. I wasn't even really listening to what she had to say, but I had half an ear to her answer. And the answer she gave me was about a woman that, to me, certainly on my defendant's instructions, wasn't the woman who was her mother. And I said to her, "I don't know who you're talking about." And I explained to her who I thought her mother was. And suddenly this woman, who hadn't had a problem at all giving evidence, she had a face that was carved in granite in terms of its rage. "Don't call that woman my mother," she said. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have touched a nerve. Well, members of the jury, in the next, not members of the jury, members of the public, in the next 25 minutes, this case fell apart. You see, as it turned out, the position was this: when this woman was 12, 13, 14 years old, Daddy was good enough for her and good enough for Mummy, but nobody else. And when the father, my defendant, began having an affair, this child, this 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, began to feel badly about her dad. When the father kicked Mother out and sought to divorce her, she began to hate her father. When Dad got a girlfriend, she really began to detest him. And when that girlfriend moved in and said to her, "Call me Mummy," and that's who I thought her mother was, that's when she decided to get him. And for whatever reason, as a young, impressionable girl, she began fantasizing in this diary. It was never meant to be read by anybody at all. Fast forward 13 years. This woman is in a relationship at that stage And her boyfriend had stuck by her, even though at 28 or 27, 26, whatever she was when they met, she had sexual problems and she was seeing a sex therapist. He'd stuck by her and they were due to move in together. She worked for a telecommunications company and he was an actor. And on the day they were due to move in, he was between jobs, so he unpacked her trunk for her. And at the bottom of that trunk, he saw her diary. He knows he shouldn't have read it. He felt guilty about it as he did, but when he read its contents, for him, that was an answer to all their problems. And so what happened was this: by the time she came back from work, he had already called the police. There were specialist rape counsellors there. There were specialist police officers, social workers. She was asked for her account, and what was she to do? Either she could have told the truth, which was, I made all this up about my dad, in which case the one man, her boyfriend, who she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, the man who'd stuck beside her through thick and thin, he'd have said, "Begone from me, you psycho woman." Or she had to stick with it and say that it was true. And she decided that the boyfriend, and not her dad, was her future. And so once she maintained that allegation and criminal proceedings were started, that wheel began to turn, she discovered that she just couldn't get off that merry-go-round one way or another. And so she saw it through to the bitter end. And the moral of this particular story is as follows. Had I sat down when the judge said to me, "Mr. D'Souza, you are beginning to harass this woman. If you've got nothing new to put, just finish." Had I sat down, had I thought, you know what does it matter anyway? He's as guilty as sin. He's got no explanation for anything. Had I taken the attitude that this young student, you know who you are, seems to take at this stage, then my client, that man, would still be in prison today, probably. And he would have been in prison because I would have decided who judge and jury were. I would have decided who was innocent or not. I would have decided who I wanted to defend with every fibre of my being and who I wanted to defend just to get the money, get it over with and get home. And so that particular case, just like many that I've done in my career, turned on a dime, turned on my commitment to my vocation, my commitment to defending to the best of my ability anybody who needs my services, who needs my help, and who has nowhere else to turn. That's what being a defense barrister is. That's what a calling is. And those of you that want to come to the bar, if you don't understand that, you've not reached the bar. Anyway, I hope that's informative.